God bless you guys. This is the next couple of rules that we're going over. Add this to the one from the previous video. So we're doing midpoint, definition of midpoint. So when to use definition of midpoint if the given mentions midpoint. So here's an example of what it would say. B is the midpoint of AC. So obviously it mentions midpoint. So here are some examples. B is the midpoint of AC. So it mentions midpoint. So we would write def of midpoint. Go ahead and write that down. And then you want to mark your statement. So it says that B is the midpoint. What that does is creates this side equal to this side. So you want to put a line there and there, and then your statement will be A to B. AB is congruent to, and then you want to do C to B. So you want to go from the corners in, C, B. So you want to mark it like I did there. From A to B is congruent to C to B. So that's the first one. Next example, Y is the midpoint of XZ. So since it mentions midpoint, we want to do def of midpoint. And then we want to mark it. So it says Y is the midpoint. So that's this line. So it goes here and here. Because this is ZXZ. So it cuts that line in half. And then again, your statement would be from one corner to the center. So X, Y is congruent to, and then the other corner to the center, ZY. So you have to do both of those parts. So over here, just to give you the note, AC was that bottom line there. So that's why it gets split into the purple and blue area. Same thing with this one. If you guys start memorizing these three type of triangles, these are the ones that I use for midpoint. So they don't always use midpoint, but most likely it will be midpoint. If it mentions midpoint, then you use midpoint. So these three shapes usually go with midpoint. So you guys start memorizing what goes with what. As soon as you see the type of triangles, it will also help you with your statements. Next example. C is the midpoint of AE, so that's this one. So we want to mark 1 to 1. And it says that it's also the midpoint of BD. So we want to mark 2 to 2. So when you do your statements, this one's going to have two sets of statements. Let's do the blue one first. So from A to C. So let's do that. So A to C is congruent to E to C. E to C, comma. And then we're going to do the purple side. B to C is congruent to D to C. So that one gave you two sets of statements because I use both lines. Sometimes it'll be just one, sometimes it'll be both. So again, we did from A to E and then split it, B to D and split it. And then again, our given mentions the word midpoint, so we would do def of midpoint. Again, don't forget to mark it. I'll do this one again just so that we can understand it, hopefully. So the statement says C is the midpoint of AE, corner to corner, AE. AE. So we mark 1 to 1. And it says that it's also the midpoint of BD. So again, not always will it have both of these as midpoint, but in this case it is. So we mark 1, 2, 1, 2. And so our statement was from A to C for this one, E to C for that one, and then B to C, and then D to C. And just to give you guys the extra note, this is the bow tie. So when we start doing our tables, we would also end up marking angle C, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about midpoint. So again, these three shapes, or these three givens, mention the word midpoint. So you want to use definition of midpoint, mark your triangles, and do your statements. So now it's your guys' turn here. Here, number 3, you'll go back to do that when I'm done. Next, definition of bisector. It works the same way if the given mentions bisector. So it's the same thing as midpoint, but it mentions the word bisects. So an example, BD bisects angle D. So it mentions the word bisects, so we're gonna write definition of angle bisector. So we do def of angle bisector. Remember that we shorten it. So for the marking, just again to give you the side note, this is reflexive here, but we're not talking about reflexive. This is a bisector. So the marking for this one, the letter that's being bisected is D. You want to put an arc through it like that. And that's it. And then our statement, again, going off of the letter that's being bisected, we write angle D is congruent to angle D. So again, whatever letter is being bisected, we put an arc through it like that, and then we write angle D is congruent to angle D, whatever letter is there. So here, my statement says OM bisects angle O. So again, we're going to draw our arc through angle O. This is angle O. So there's our marking. It mentions definition of bisector, or it mentions the word bisect, so we're going to do def of angle bisector. And our statement here, the angle that's being bisected is angle O. So we do angle O is congruent to angle O. Again, the one that's being bisected, we write it congruent to itself. Last statement, RT bisects R. So again, angle R is the one that's being bisected, so we're gonna draw an arc through it like that. Def of angle bisector. And then angle R is the one that's being bisected, so angle R is congruent to angle R. So again, if it mentions the word bisects, we use the definition of angle bisector, and whatever angle is being bisected, that is our statement. So now you guys have your 3 practice questions here as well. One for midpoint and one for angle bisector.